You just take a look at this critical strike damage. And with this build in Diablo 4, you will not only be one-shot in single targets, you'll be one-shot in huge groups of enemies, or at least destroy them extremely fast. It's a melee rogue build that uses penetrating shot, which may seem quite unusual, but keep in mind that it not only has an insane amount of damage, but also grants a high survivability. And let's take a look at the skills. First of all, I'm using Blade Shift. And yeah, I realized that the combination of the Blade Shift and the penetrating shot is very unusual. I believe not many meta builds use it, but I get a perfect reason to choose Blade Shift here, or even I get two reasons, not just one. First of all, when you hit a target with Blade Shift, you can freely move through your enemies for 3 seconds, and this is really good, because this whole penetrating shot tactics is all about geometry or position, where you stand. You absolutely need the right position to hit all the enemies with just one shot, so this means you want to move freely. And it also increases our survivability. Additionally, we have moving speed from Blade Shift, so it's a good skill in general. And yet the main reason why I put it here is this legendary Paragon node, Tricks of the Trade. Your marksman skills grant your next cutthroat skill 25% increased damage, and the other way around. Your cutthroat skills grant your next marksman skill 25% increased damage too. So when we cast Blade Shift, we get 25% increased damage on our next penetrating shot, and that's really good. That being said, we can move to the main skill of this build, is the penetrating shot. We fire an arrow that pierces through all enemies in a line and deals huge damage. And with combo points, it deals even more damage and has the additional lucky hit chance. And we'll make lucky hits all the time, which is very important for this build, as well as for pretty much any other build, of course. Anyway, we are moving on. We obviously want to take both improvements for penetrating shot, so that it starts dealing 10% increased damage per each enemy it pierces, plus it also increases our critical strike chance with improved penetrating shot in case if we hit at least 3 enemies, and this will happen like pretty much always unless you fight a boss. Next thing, considering that we'll fight in the close range, I'd also take the Sturdy, since it's the close range damage reduction, and Siphoning Strikes to heal ourselves. We are gonna be healing ourselves not only from penetrating shot, but also from Blade Shift. Next skill that I take is Shadow Step. I use it as a gap closure, but we are additionally increasing our critical strike chance against target by 8% when using the Shadow Step. And we also stun them. Now there's also a good reason to take the Discipline Shadow Step to decrease the cooldown time of it, because we are gonna be using it as an escape option as well. Although in this particular build I have another escape option. Something, that grants us unstoppable and lets us survive stuns from bosses. But if you're not planning on to take Concealment, I suggest you rather took the Discipline Shadow Step. And Shadow Step is also a cutthroat skill, so after using it we have our additional 25% for the penetrating shot, by the way. Now, as the passive here, Weapon Mastery is an absolutely must-have, because we are gonna be using a crossbow, and the Weapon Mastery maxed out grants us 15% increased critical strike damage when using a crossbow. Next we have Smoke Grenade. Again, that's also not a meta skill, I'd say, but I like it here for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's because of the survivability. We're throwing a smoke grenade and it dazes enemies. And those dazed enemies can't attack you or use skills, so you have a pretty high survivability. It will help you out in a tough fight. But besides, enemies affected by smoke grenade take 15% more damage from you. So we are gonna be making even more damage. That being said, there are actually other abilities that can be used instead of the smoking grenade. One of them is, for example, Shadow Imbuement. And that not only because of the damage, because we're not gonna have any problems with damage with cleaning out massive amounts of enemies, it's more because of this passive that regenerates his energy. And we're going further, it's Concealment. It's our way to escape because we get unstoppable. When we use it we go stealth, we have high movement speed, so it is our way to survive. Additionally, we restore 40 energy when casted, and I took this critical strike from Concealment because again the build is all about the critical strikes. As passives we take Exploit, additional damage to healthy and injured enemies, and of course Malice, which is a must-have, it's additional damage to vulnerable enemies. And you might of course wonder, how do we make enemies vulnerable in the first place? And here comes another thing that we must take from the Paragon board. It's a glyph called Exploit. It grants us additional damage to vulnerable enemies, but the most important thing, when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds per enemy. So in fact, with one penetrating shot, we make all enemies vulnerable and have all of these extra effects against them, not counting extra damage. Next comes called imbuement. Again, it's kind of a crowd control. We're making enemies slow, we're freezing them, and with a lucky hit we have a 20% chance to instantly freeze them. And remember, we have lucky hits all the time. And the main reason why I take it is Frigid Finesse. It grants 15% increased damage to chilled enemies and 30% against frozen enemies. And pretty much all the enemies will be chilled after one penetrating shot. And here I don't have any ultimate. I don't really think it's necessary for this build, but I took Enervation to restore energy. It gives 30% chance to gain 8 energy on each lucky hit, and we are doing lucky hits on each penetrating shot. And we add Adrenaline Rush for increased energy regeneration, but above all because it leads to impetus. After moving 15 meters, your next attack deals 21% increased damage. And considering that we are gonna be moving all the time, we're gonna have a lot of extra damage from this one too. Now next thing, as long as you're using penetrating shot, Precision is a must-have key passive. Each time when you critical strike an enemy, you gain 1 precision, which grants you 4% increased critical strike damage up to 20%. And when you have 5 stacks of precision, your next marksman skill, and since the only marksman skill we have in this build is penetrating shot, it's gonna be penetrating shot, of course. Well, your next marksman skill gets a guaranteed critical strike that deals 40% increased critical strike damage, and that's where those huge crits come from. And now we're proceeding to the items. Items are very important for this build. It's a high-level build, so you kinda need good items. First things first, you need a good crossbow, and by good I mean one with high damage with good effects. It might cost you a lot of money to make such a crossbow, but when you do, you'll be capable of one-shotting pretty much anything. Now speaking about items, I love the items that either increase damage of your core skill, like this one, I wish I had better chance but no luck, or the aspects that grant you decent defense, like for example my favorite item. You only need it for nightmare dungeons actually, but I also like to use these aspects when hit and not healthy. A magical bubble is gonna be summoned and you are immune, so you do not take any damage, no effects can be applied to you, you are absolutely safe. Some other aspects that are about vulnerable status are absolutely must have, like for example this one. It makes enemies vulnerable, has 40% chance, again not the best chance unfortunately, to grant 3+ increased critical strike chance for 3 seconds up to 9%. And finally, the most crucial aspect for this build, the absolutely must-have, is this one. Whenever penetrating shot damages an enemy, 2 additional arrows split up to either side. Those arrows deal 35% or even up to 38% of penetrating shot base damage and do not split. And actually you can count upon even more damage if you use your main weapon, the crossbow. But 35% is already enough to apply all the statuses, like vulnerable, shield, all the other stuff. As for the Paragon board, as I've already mentioned, the must-have glyph here is Exploit. As for rare notes, here I take a few for core skill, basic skill damage, and the only glyph that I leveled up is Combat, critical strike damage with core skills. So guys, this build works extremely easy. We're just moving around, trying to hit as many enemies with penetrating shots as possible. If the situation gets tough, we just use Concealment or simply run away. I mean, quite often we will run away and start shooting enemies from larger distances, but normally we want to fight in a melee range because this way the build is the most effective. This build is sort of evolution for my ranged rogue build for leveling up. That one is another melee build but for low levels. There I use Barrage instead of penetrating shot. It's also a good build you can check out in the video that you now see on your screen. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for your attention. Bye bye!